A horrific street race in California leaves two young girls orphaned and a community in shock. But what might be even more shocking is the punishment handed down to those responsible. We're going to get answers from the district attorney himself. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. By the way, before we jump into this, I have an exciting announcement for you guys in case you don't know about this, but the video version of Sidebar is now available on Spotify. That's right, we are so thankful for your guys' support of Sidebar. Us getting this show on Spotify video is truly due to how loyal this audience is, so thank you so much for that. And yes, you can now watch and listen on the go, from Diddy to the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively updates to wild court moments. It's all on Spotify. So right now, you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to follow Sidebar on Spotify. In November of 2022, what started out as a spontaneous street race on El Camino Real in Redwood City, California, ended in absolute tragedy. Two strangers, then 17-year-old Cesar Morales and 23-year-old Kyle Harrison, decided to race their cars at speeds reaching more than 100 miles per hour, according to prosecutors. And in a matter of seconds, that reckless behavior would forever change the lives of an innocent family. 44-year-old Greg Ammen and 42-year-old Grace Spiridon were driving home from dinner with their 7-year-old twin daughters, Madison and Olivia. And as they turned onto El Camino Real, Morales' Mercedes T-boned their Chevy Bolt, according to a wrongful death lawsuit, which we will get into in a minute. But the impact was catastrophic. Greg, Grace, they were killed instantly, but miraculously, those twin girls survived the crash. But Grace's sister told the San Mateo Daily Journal that the girls were left covered in their parents' blood. How horrific is that? Now, in the aftermath, the community rallied around Madison and Olivia. GoFundMe raised over $500,000 to support these now orphan girls. But as the legal process unfolded, many were left frustrated by what they saw as an inadequate punishment for such a devastating loss of life. Why do I say that? Because Morales, who was 17 at the time of the crash, was initially charged with 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter. And despite efforts by prosecutors to try him as an adult, a judge ruled he would be tried in juvenile court. And the judge ended up finding him guilty of 2 counts of felony vehicular manslaughter, 3 counts of engaging in a street race that caused great bodily injury, and 1 count of engaging in a speed contest, but not guilty of second-degree murder. And what was his sentence? He was sentenced, again, for killing 2 people, leaving these 2 girls orphaned. He was sentenced earlier this month to just 90 days of electronic home monitoring. That's it. He has to stay at home with his parents at all times, except for going to things like school or medical appointments. Now, Morales had been in juvenile detention for around 2 years, and he was released to his family on his 20th birthday. But think about that. Because as you can imagine, that light sentence has sparked outrage, particularly with the victim's family. Liza Spiridon, this is Grace's sister, didn't mince words. We see Grace and Greg as being murdered. They died instantly upon impact. Their daughters had their blood on them. There needs to be more awareness and exposure. The victims are not getting the justice they deserve. Spiridon raised concerns about the message that this sends to other teen drivers and street racers. She equated cars to weapons. And by the way, in the law, sometimes a car is considered a weapon. And she argued that until meaningful changes are made, tragedies like this will continue to occur. But what about the other driver, the stranger who'd apparently agreed to race Morales at the stoplight? Well, police say Kyle Harrison, who was 23 at the time, fled the scene in his BMW. He wasn't directly involved in the crash, but of course he played a major part in causing it, right? Police find him. They arrest him 2 weeks after this deadly race. He entered a no contest plea to 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter, which means he's now facing up to 9 years in state prison. And that's a sentence that would be more than 30 times longer than Morales's, the person who actually hit the family's car. According to court records, Harrison's sentencing is scheduled for February 25th, but the stark contrast in potential punishments has left many questioning the fairness of our justice system. How can 2 individuals involved in the same incident face such wildly different consequences? Is a 90-day home detention truly sufficient for the actions that left 2 young girls without parents? And adding another layer to this case, this tragic case, there is a civil lawsuit that has been filed on behalf of these orphan twins. So the suit names Morales, Harrison, and even Morales' parents as defendants. And it alleges that Morales' parents, they were aware of their son's, quote, proclivity for reckless driving, yet still allowed him to take the car and drive that night. The suit also names 2 juveniles identified only as ES and JM who were passengers in Morales' car that night. And the lawsuit filed in 2023 provides just chilling details of how this race unfolded, because when Morales and Harrison found themselves stopped at that same red light, according to the complaint, quote, Harrison and Morales signaled to each other to race, while Morales' passengers, ES and JM, egged Harrison on, taunting him and encouraging the two to race their vehicles down El Camino Real. Defendants rolled the dice with the lives of others. That's exactly, in my opinion, that seems exactly true. The lawsuit also gives us a little bit more information, though, about the victims, Greg and Grace. The complaint says Greg was enthusiastic about Boy Scouts, backpacking, cars, and playing percussion in the El Camino Youth Symphony. His love of music led him to earn a BA degree in sound arts from SAE Expression College, Emeryville, California. He used his creativity and leadership skills as an engineering manager at Dolby Laboratories. Greg loved the outdoors, biking, hiking, and camping, all of which he shared with Grace and his girls. He quietly led by example and was always there for friends and family. Grace enjoyed piano, ballet, dancing, karate, soccer, and traveling. When Grace put her mind to something, she would reach it regardless of the obstacles. This quality was needed in 1998 when she survived a life-threatening car crash, making her more determined to love life, her family, friends, and colleagues. She earned a BA at UC Davis and later an MBA from Columbia University and UC Berkeley while working at Gap. In October, Grace received a promotion at Google, where she worked for the past 8 years, becoming head of new service introduction. She is remembered for her trademark smile, positive outlook, and respect for others. The fact that she survived another crash is just insane here. And Greg and Grace, they were inseparable in life and now in death as a result of the defendant's wanton conduct. The lawsuit also, by the way, includes photos from the accident scene showing the mangled cars. Investigators say the Chevy Bolt that the Ammen family was in was thrown about 100 feet due to that impact. And the complaint says that Olivia and Madison, they were extricated from that burning car by Good Samaritans before police got to the scene. That's how lucky they are to be alive. They were eventually taken to a hospital for treatment. We don't know their exact injuries, but we do know that Madison broke her arm, has had to have several surgeries. Just horrific. And when it comes to Morales' parents, the lawsuit claims they knew about his penchant for racing and even paid to modify his car. According to the attorneys representing the Ammen family, Morales' vehicle, the 2005 Mercedes-Benz E55 V1, was modified with a smaller supercharger pulley, which causes the supercharger to spin faster and produce more power, and had the catalytic converters and mufflers removed, which may increase power and makes the car much louder. The suit claims that Susanna and Arnold Morales paid for the modifications to the Mercedes and that it was registered in Arnold's name. And this lawsuit was filed under 2 causes of action. So you have negligence, wrongful death, and negligent entrustment, wrongful death. So that's really directed toward the parents for allowing him, entrusting him with this car to use the car. And the civil case seeks compensatory general damages as well as relief for past and future expenses related to the care of Madison and Olivia. And beyond financial compensation, the family hopes that this lawsuit will raise awareness about the dangers of street racing and reckless driving. The lawsuit, by the way, is still making its way through the San Mateo County's court system. Case management conference is set for next week. But Michael Ammen, this is the girl's uncle, he spoke with CBS News in the Bay Area about just the emotional toll of having to relive this tragedy through the legal process. He said, it's something we have to relive every day, whether we want to or not. There are days where we're dealing with the lawsuit and reliving it, and there are days where we're trying to get on with our lives and having to relive it. By the way, this case has also shed light on just a growing epidemic of street racing in California. In fact, according to the California Highway Patrol, there has been an alarming increase in unsafe driving behaviors, including street racing. For example, according to stats from April 2021 to July of 2023, the California Highway Patrol issued more than 40,000 citations to drivers going faster than 100 miles per hour. And over a 5-year period, CHP said it linked 264 crashes to street racing and sideshows, resulting in 30 deaths. Okay, so now I want to bring in Stephen Wagstaffe. So he is the district attorney of San Mateo County. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you for the work that you do. I have to imagine this was an incredibly difficult and emotional case to work on, right? I mean, you're talking about 2 little girls who were orphaned here. Talk to us about what it was like to work on this case.
Good morning, and you accurately describe it. This case, I've dealt with murder cases and tragedies for many decades here as a prosecutor. This one's was particularly sad for the reasons you mentioned. I mean, it's two people who lost their lives and two little 7-year-old girls who are the cutest little girls you could ever imagine who have lost their parents. And at 7, it's impossible for them to fully grasp what it was about. So talking with them as I had the opportunity to do, it always dramatically tugged at one's heartstrings as the case proceeded.
Before we get into the legal issues that are surrounding this whole case, and there's a lot, do you know how the girls are doing? Do you know how the family is doing? If you have any kind of update.
Well, I can tell you, and I know that the family is very concerned about their privacy, but they were at all the court proceedings, and I'm told the girls are doing as well as they could. One of the girls was really suffering with night terrors, and I'm told that's diminished some. And so I think they're making progress. They're getting help and therapy, as well as they have a very loving family about them. And so I think one would say that it is as good as it can be under the circumstances.
Yeah, it sounds like they have an incredible support system. If you could do us a favor, if you get a chance to speak to them, please send them our best wishes, our prayers, because they definitely need it. All right, I want to ask you now about the law, because this is really the parts that I'm just struggling to make sense of. First, let's talk about what were the factors that led to the judge to decide to keep Morales' case in juvenile court?
Well, under California law, and California law has changed in the last 5 years. If this had occurred 6-7 years ago, there's no issue. This case would have immediately gone to adult court because the decision whether to be in adult court or juvenile court belonged to the prosecutor. We would file a case like this. I would have filed directly in adult court. That's where it would have proceeded. But that California legislature and our governor changed that law. And said, no, it's going to be to a judge in juvenile court. And then they changed the law again 2 years ago to make it even more difficult to move a case to adult court. And they said, we're going to have 5 factors. The facts and circumstances of the crime, no matter how tragic, are just one of those 5 factors. Otherwise, it's how sophisticated was the juvenile accused of the crime? What was the mental state? Is it likely that the juvenile can benefit from the rehabilitation efforts in juvenile court? So the focus really changed from how evil is the crime to do we think that this juvenile can be helped? And maybe that's a good change for a lot of cases. I don't feel that's the case for murder.
What would have been his sentence if he was in adult court and was convicted of what he was convicted of?
If it was what he's convicted of, because ultimately the judge did not convict him of murder, but that we charged him with, but convicted him of vehicular manslaughter, 2 counts. But even then, if in adult court, he would have faced upwards of approaching 6, 8, 10 years in state prison. If he had been convicted of murder, which is what we think the case was, it would have been 2 counts. He could have faced up to 30 years to life in prison. Would be the maximum. And so the difference between there and juvenile court with what he received is not just large, it's the size of the Pacific Ocean, so wide in that difference.
Made of questions. First question I have is why wasn't he convicted of murder? What was the judge's rationale, if any?
He did not feel that the facts supported what second-degree murder requires, and that is a willful disregard for the safety of other people. It doesn't require an intent to kill. That's not required, but it does require that there be this willful disregard. We felt it was shown by the facts in the case and the behavior that this 17-year-old engaged in. She did not. Judge Edizadi made the decision that no, it was 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter. And that's what judges get paid to do. That's why they don the robe.
From the decision to keep it in juvenile court to the decision to find him not guilty of murder, are you angry?
Certainly disappointed, angry, probably. I mean, I've shared the anger that the victim's family feel. They are very angry at the outcome. They don't feel it was fair. as to what's happened to him. It's just I would say angry is, I don't get angry too much about anything anymore because I see so much in criminal justice.
Yeah.
I would certainly say vast disappointment.
I'm angry. I have to be honest with you. I was reading about this case and I'm really angry, and I'm still struggling what the theory was from the decision. Did the judge, the best that you can explain, was it a sense of, this was an immaturity? There is not that level of evilness. He didn't really, appreciate what he was doing, the significant danger he was posing to others. I'm trying to understand what her view was of this defendant.
As best we can see when she gave her decision, I think the things that you just ran through are right on the mark. I think those were very significant to her. This was not a young man who was a gang member, been involved in prior criminal behavior, or anything like that. It was instead of, but again, he wasn't a 14-year-old either. He was he was 2 months short of being 18. If this had occurred literally 2 months later, it wouldn't have ever been in juvenile court. He would have been 18 in an adult court. But she still felt immature, unsophisticated, and that was her assessment. And she saw him up close. She was watching him in court for all these court appearances, and they had, the defense had experts who said, the mind is not fully developed and all the things that we encounter on these. I don't agree with it. I think it misses the mark. I think it fails to show he knew exactly what he was doing. He took that vehicle up over 110 miles an hour on a street where it's heavily traveled street, and with pedestrians as well as other cars. And he just, to me, that was a willful disregard for anybody's safety when the speed limit there is 35 miles an hour and he's going 110.
And, he was convicted of felonies. I don't understand. This is the main question. I don't get the sentence. I need you to rationalize it for me and for our audience about how that is an appropriate sentence, considering he took 2 parents away from their children forever, killed 2 people. How is that an appropriate sentence for him?
In my view, it's not. I think both on California law and what we asked for. The judge had the discretion to say, you're going to stay locked up in juvenile hall for 1 more year until he turned 21. So it's bad on both levels. We felt the judge should have kept him in for a whole nother year, not 90 days of home arrest, and for at least that 1 more year. But it's also California law. California law is just off base on how it deals with juveniles. And again, maybe that works for car thieves and that sort of a thing. You're talking 2 lives that were lost here. This is 2 children that have no parents for the remainder of their lives. It's a horrible crime, and he did it with total disregard for anybody else. It could have been a school bus. He could have he could have killed dozens. And I don't know. For me, that's murder.
He could have killed those 2 girls. Let me ask you this. Has he shown remorse for his actions at all?
Our probation department that did the analysis of him for sentencing did say that he is very remorseful. His attorney in court said, yes, he's remorseful, but the attorney announced, I'm not going to let him talk. So the attorney wouldn't let him get up there and say it, the attorney said. But he does look, as he sits in court, he did look as if he was horrified by what he did. But that's after the fact, But it is true. We're not sitting there like we do get sometimes with no big deal and just shrugging it off. No, I would not say he lacked remorse.
And just before we move on to Harrison, for Mr. Morales, is there any other restrictions that would be put on his life that we know of? Or I know there's no way to appeal this decision from the judge, but any other restrictions we should know about with respect to his punishment?
There's no, minor restrictions. He's under, he has to stay home during this period of probation. He can't, he's got a curfew and all that. It's the other factors that he suffers are not a whole bunch different than any parent does when their child violates their curfew. It's 90 days, stay at home, and that's it.
So from my point of view, he is just as guilty as Harrison in the sense that they both created this, this danger. However, Harrison wasn't the one who killed these parents. And yet he was 23, right? And he could be sentenced to significant prison time. I mean, talk to us about what we can expect from his sentencing. And there will be people who look at this and say, that doesn't seem just, that although he was a contributing factor for what happened, he wasn't the one who actually T-boned this car. Why is he getting prison time? So talk to us about what we can expect from his sentencing and whether or not it is a just sentence.
You know, great questions. And that was exactly what I did when I made the decision as to what we would do with him. For the reasons you just mentioned. Yes, it did take two people for this to occur. But he's not the one who killed these two parents. He was a factor, and that's why we could have convicted. We could have gone forward and prosecuted him for 2 counts of second-degree murder and hope to get that conviction and sentence, and he would have faced up to 30 years to life in prison. That's not fair. That's not justice. Even if we might have been able to do that in court, as a prosecutor, our job is to do justice, and it's for that reason that we allowed him to plead to the lesser charges out of a sense of justice in light of what was done with the actual killer, Morales. And so to that extent, he is facing prison because he did do this, and he was 23. And whether or not it's accurate, the law does draw a dramatic distinction between a 17-year-old and a 23-year-old. He did flee from the scene. It isn't like he stayed around. But a difference with him, his remorse from the time he was arrested has been articulated and evident. This man feels horrible about what happened. And it's for that reason that he is, don't know what the judge is going to do, but it could be up to in the area of 7, 8, 9 years in that arena. I don't know that it will be. I want to see what a pre-sentence report says, but justice required some diminishment of the potential punishment that he faced.
Before I let you go, are you concerned that a case like this is going to send the wrong signal to drag racers and street racers and other people who want to engage in this kind of behavior?
I think there is a message, and it's the wrong message that comes out of this. I do agree. I don't know if it's for street racers or whomever, but I think it's for you. And that is, I think the message that if you're young, even if you kill somebody, because for decades, we've been treating people who do this type of thing, they've moved to adult court. If you're charged with murder, you go to adult court on that line. And I think that's a bad message that flows from it, that, you know what, if you're 17 years and 10 months old, you're going to get more lenient treatment. And you know where our concern goes? We know that that's what gangs do. Gangs will use juveniles because they feel that there's no punishment for them. And that includes murder. We've had those cases, even in our pretty low crime county, we still get those cases. And that's the message that I think is a bad message. It's not the one that we as the DA want to send. And we're sorry that message came in this case.
That's a really good point and a really scary point. I hear you 100%. Stephen Wagstaffe, District Attorney of San Mateo County, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your interest in it. Take care.
That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.